As I will indicate at the meeting tonight, there was an old Procol Harum song from the 60s about a souvenir from London where the band came back with a clap. In my case, Darren and I came back with COVID and had a great time in Alaska, if I can remember that. And then we came home on a plane that left at midnight yesterday and got in at 7 a.m. this morning. And between our COVID symptoms and the plane, I think we may have slept all of 2 hours. So after the meeting starts, I'm going to turn the meeting over to somebody else because I don't know if I'm going to manage the night. Okay? Do I have a volunteer? No experience necessary. Somebody's going to volunteer, I hope. Okay. The other item is we have theoretically our decision to make on the Chantilly Premier. And I believe our best solution to this is recommend they go with a warehouse and not argue against a data center. They came up with 3 choices. As it is, a data center or a warehouse. And I think our best bullet is just to say we think a warehouse is the better choice and not get into the giant argument about why a data center would be a bad thing. Just go with a positive. But it's up to you folks because I may be asleep by that time. Any thoughts?
I don't disagree.
Okay, then.
Hey, Jeff, this is Jay. You know, I'm not sure that it was an option for us to give them.
They sent us slides with the warehouse. I mean, if you look back on the original night they came to us, we had slides in the data center and data and slides on a warehouse. And we ought to call them on their bluff.
Well, again, I think the primary thing for them was to put in the data center. If the data center was not going to be able to be put in, then they would opt to put in the warehouse. I don't think it was up for us to make a decision on which we would support.
Well, of course it is. It's coming to us for our comments and thoughts. So either we can go into a long litany about why we don't think a data center is a good thing, or we can be positive and say, of the 2 choices, we'd prefer this. Which is saying we don't prefer the other. But again, the body can decide how it wishes to go. I'm not going to be in a position to argue. I'm going to go over to CVS and get something that's going to drug me so much that I'm going to sleep through the nights because I've been hacking and coughing and never mind. You don't want to hear the details. But I am what you might say, the walking wounded. I have never had COVID, neither myself or my wife. Luckily, I still have an appetite. My wife didn't. So every night and the dinner where the 9 of my family joined us for dinner to have dinner at the cruise, my wife was saying, this texture is interesting, but I can't taste the thing. And it was, never mind. All right. Do you hear me, Lewis? No, he's logging out again. Okay. Jim is here. I see that. That's good. All right, a couple more minutes. Now, this information went to all of the, something like 60 people from Pleasant Valley who are on a distribution. So they're aware of the situation. They got the same information I sent out to you folks.
I sent them specifically the link, so hopefully.
Okay. And we should have Mo joining us tonight. Let me make sure that he has it. So I'll forward this to him. In case he hasn't seen it yet. Hold on here. Hold on. Boop, 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 boop. Let me get the phone.
Jim Hart, I don't know if you can hear us,
Hey, Mo.
but
Hey,
Jeff
Mo.
is thinking that we have an alternative, an option, that we can provide them a recommendation to build A, B, or C. And he's thinking that we should maybe recommendation to build a data warehouse versus option
Not a
A,
data
which
warehouse,
was
a
the,
warehouse.
what I said, a warehouse, I'm sorry, a warehouse instead of the data center and instead of the auto lot. I wasn't sure that we were given options. They were looking at alternative one, if it could be built. If they could not build that, then they would go for option or alternate two, which would be the data warehouse.
And it's my belief.
I guess
That's,
if,
go
if
ahead.
they were willing to do that, I don't know if that would change the application some. I think we still would have some logistical questions, and I'm not sure that at least the transportation issue gets any better. But if it was just a warehouse, I don't know. I mean, do we have to decide something tonight?
I don't think we do. Matter of fact, I think we should postpone it. Any recommendation until we hear what staff gets. They were supposed to be doing a study that's due back to them sometime at the end of the year.
Well, I think they're doing an addendum, and I sent a few questions to Evan Pritchard, and other than I think staff answered one of them, that Parkstone is 88 feet tall, so this would be a little taller than Parkstone. I guess somebody answered the other one. The one that's at the corner of 50 and Stonecroft.
Okay,
70
wait, before we get too
75
involved in
feet.
this, remember the first order of business is Mo, where we're going to do the triple P. And that should be a time certain. It's a dedicated point, and we'll take care of that and then go on to the Chantilly Premier afterwards, because that one is open ended and can last, as it has other nights, many hours. It's after 7 o'clock. So with that in mind, let me first welcome you to the August Joint Sully District Land Use and Transportation Committee. As I mentioned earlier, this meeting is being held virtually because I have COVID, the first time in my life, thank you. And I'm existing in about 2 hours of sleep from our red-eye flight from San Francisco yesterday. So I'm not going to last the night. We will hear from Mohamed Ali when he joins us. He's already has the link. And when that is over, all right, so he just joined us. There he is. We see Mohamed. Wave to Mohamed. There we go.
Hi, good afternoon.
Okay, so we have provided everybody the copies of the two handouts, one of which is the changed wording, the other one is the red line of the changed wording. We will go over that in detail, and when that is over, we'll either give them our recommendations if they're looking for recommendations or feedback, and then we will open the discussion to whatever the body decides for the Chantilly Premier situation. Poonam, thank you for joining us. Anthony, thank you for joining us. And our normal cohort, thank you again for joining us today. As I've indicated, I'm going to sign out and make somebody the permanent meeting manager in case I fall asleep. And I think, having a look at these people, it's going to be the Jay or Lewis. Whichever one doesn't want to do it, step back 2 feet. Okay. All right. So, Lewis, I think that's it for you. You didn't give it the negative response that Jay did. Okay.
No, he turned off his camera, so obviously he doesn't want to do it.
Okay. So when that happens, all I'm going to do is turn the meeting and make Lewis the permanent host of the meeting rather than myself. When the meeting's over, it will ask if you want to save the files. Please save the files. The meeting is being recorded, and sometime in the near future, I'll be able to post this as I have all the other times as well. With that, is there any other comments that we have or suggestions before I'm going to make Lewis the host of the meeting after I make Mohammed the presenter? Okay, with that in mind, first thing first, Mohammed, you're going to be presenter. I'm going to do this right now. And so here, and I think I can click on this, make presenter. Okay. Mohammed, it should say you're the presenter.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much, Jeff.
Okay. Now, the next thing is I'm going to make the host and move to stage, stop video. Okay. When I log off as a member, I'm going to make Lewis the host. And for that, I'm going to mute myself now.
All right.
right.
Good.
So it looks like we have made that transition successfully. And Mohammed, why don't you go ahead with your presentation?
Hi. So good evening, everybody. Thank you guys so much for taking the time out tonight and letting me present. So Salem Bush, our branch chief for the public facility branch, was supposed to be presenting tonight, but he's on vacation. So I'm going to do my best to try to give his presentation because he was working on this first phase of the public facility policy plan update. And then I can answer whatever questions you guys have at the end of the presentation. Like I said, I am Mohamed Ali from the Department of Planning and Development, and we'll just go over the public facility policy plan amendment and the draft text that's been shared. All right, so I just want to quickly go through the background of how we got here tonight with the draft text and just kind of go through our agenda. So back in July of 2020, the Board of Supervisors, they authorized this specific plan amendment, and Salem's kind of been working on that for the last 2 to 3 years. And I will say that right after he actually goes to Planning Commission and the board towards the end of the year, I'm going to pick up and start phase 2 of this particular project. And the board also earlier this year has authorized for the rest of the comprehensive policy plan to be updated as well. So the public facility one is just kind of the first one that the team has been working on. So over the course of the update, staff have been coordinating with stakeholder agencies across the county to provide feedback on the overall amendment, on 2232 review process, and the recommended edits to the plan. So staff has met probably well over 40 agencies to discuss this update and to discuss how important the comprehensive plan is when planning, funding, reviewing, and approving new facilities throughout the county. And I would say that this process has also strengthened planning department's relationship with these agencies, and they have provided critical feedback for the update. So this should be a comprehensive list of all of the agencies that we've kind of been coordinating with. So we initially came and presented to your committee back, I would say probably around November, if not late October of 2022, just to kind of give an update on where the process was at the time. But this particular presentation is more so about the draft text, which is kind of ready for the public to review. So throughout the process, staff has kind of provided regular updates to the Planning Commission. So we've kind of met with them across the dates that are listed in the screen. The last one being back in April. And the land use process review committee has provided like updates and feedback as well. And we'll continue to be coordinating with the Planning Commission as the project moves forward. So significant community engagement efforts have been established to inform the public of this update, to provide transparency to the public on how the county plans, funds, reviews, and approves facilities throughout the county. A lot of this initial effort has been educating the public on the role of comprehensive plan in the CIP, in the 2232 Public Facilities Review of new facilities throughout the county, and of course to get input from the public on the plan update and how they can be engaged throughout the process. So if there is a website, a plan amendment website that's been established for this particular project, and it contains all the information regarding staff, community planning commission meetings, and there are also like planner talk videos that Channel 16 has helped produce, which kind of talk a little bit more about how facilities are developed throughout the county. So as I said, in October to December of last year, we held probably about 10 public input meetings, and then had 3 virtual community-wide meetings after that. In this second phase of community engagement, we've already completed 3 countywide virtual meetings, and now we're just trying to trek through the targeted supervisor district meetings just to kind of get that feedback from the community. So to update the draft text, staff took into account several input channels. As we talked about earlier, to the stakeholder agencies input from the Planning Commission, community engagement meetings, and coordination with the supervisor's office, as well as other countywide documents, which particularly is the One Fairfax policy and the strategic plan. Oops, sorry. All right. So if we kind of get into the bulk of what this particular meeting is about, which is the draft text, I don't know how many of you guys got the opportunity to kind of go through those 2 documents, but there are certainly some themes that you will see sprinkled throughout the proposed revised text, and I just kind of want to point those out. One big part of this plan update was to align the policy plan more with the capital improvement program and the 2232 process. So you will see some policies that aim at doing that. Also, we have significantly updated the references to co-location of facilities and try to use some qualifiers to help promote the co-location of facilities in the right context. Additionally, as the county has grown and land is less available than it ever was, we try to incorporate some policies that encourage more flexibility to plan and develop public facilities with more urban design approaches. And certainly another theme is provided better access to services for residents throughout the county. And as I mentioned before, policies that incorporate the countywide vision of the strategic plan and One Fairfax policy. So also, outside of that, the last time that the plan was updated was probably around 1990 when it was first adopted. So there are a significant amount of editorial changes and policy changes. So some of the sections in the public facilities policy plan saw more than others, and a few of those are the schools and the library section. And I know Salem's kind of proposed moving away from using inventory maps and focusing more on the inventory of facilities in the area plans. And as I said, I'll be working on phase 2 of that, which is more so looking at the plan areas across the county and looking at the comprehensive plan map. So yeah. So next steps right now, as I said, Salem has already kind of done meetings with Planning Commission, and right now we're doing more so our community engagement. So the draft text is going to be finalized, if not the end of this month, I would say probably around September. And then in the fall is when it's going to be more so public hearings and meetings with the Planning Commission. Hopefully this plan amendment will be adopted, if not late 2023, early 2024. So yeah, that's a little bit about this presentation. I don't know if you guys have any questions or feedback. I'll try to answer your questions as best as I can.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Okay. So the 2232, I just want to make sure I do apologize. I have not read through all of this. But the 2232, is that the same process that is used for building substations, electrical substations and such?
Yeah, so for all public facilities across the county, it's a state code. So this is outside of Fairfax County.
Okay, thank you.
And this is Louis, just a kind of a general question for you, but since you've been engaged in this process now for a couple of years, since there have been a number of different outreach activities that have been done, virtual public meetings or in-person meetings or interactions with the planning commissioners, board of supervisors, have any revisions from what you started with been major in nature? Or has it pretty much been just kind of minor, oh, we can say word X this way or word Y a little bit differently to make it more understandable for people?
Yeah, I would say that the editorial changes are more so making the language a little bit more digestible for folks, but also coordinating with like all the different agencies across the county and making sure that the policies that are in the comprehensive plan kind of align with where they're at, and kind of looking at like the future and what they'd like to see. Kind of like touching on one of them, I would say is probably like health and human services and how they're looking more so at meeting residents across the county where they're at and looking at facilities where they can possibly co-locate or kind of open up like a neighborhood office or something where residents don't have to travel halfway across the county for services. So that's one. And then when it comes to the board and the planning commission, I think two of the things that they were really supportive about is co-location. Very similar to the Sully district supervisor's office. I think that's co-located with the police station, and making sure that there's appropriate co-location of different county services. So
Okay.
hopefully that answers your question.
It did a reasonable job on that. I see a couple questions popped up in the chat pod. Let me read those off to you. Mohamed, I wanted to ask two questions. Why would county policy back off of mitigating impacts and now just consider impacts?
I'm sorry, I didn't get the question. Mitigating impacts?
So the question is, why would county policy back off of mitigating impacts and now just consider impacts? It's a question posed by Jim, and he may want to expand on that if his mic system's working.
Yeah, is it possible if you can kind of expand on that?
Sure. Well, I typed it because I was thinking while everyone was talking, but I read the Redline version and I was trying to see some of the changes, the editorial changes from what we have to where we're going. And one of the big things at the beginning that struck me was that the text now says we're going to mitigate impacts from these, I guess, 2232 uses or whatever. And the new text strikes mitigate and uses instead the word consider. And considering impacts may mean you don't do anything. And I wonder why would we not want to still mitigate impacts? Why is that not a good thing? Why is considering them better than mitigating?
Do you have a page number for that?
Yeah, give me a second. I'll find it. Hang on. It's toward the beginning.
It's at the beginning, you said?
I thought that was a huge shift. And
So for the vast majority of this first phase, I did not partake in that, but I'm going to assume maybe it's to be a little bit more flexible. But I know as we're also, like I said, the public facility aspect.
yes, it's objective 4 at the top of page 6. And instead of mitigate the impact of public facilities on adjacent planned and existing land uses, the word mitigate is struck, and now we just consider it. And it seems to me that that could mean we're going to have greater impacts post-approval? I'm asking the question as to why that's a good thing.
I think maybe what I'm assuming is that was just to be a little bit more flexible depending on the type of public facility. Because I think different public facilities, like a school is different. An existing school is very much different from having a substation built.
Which is a true statement, but I think the point Jim's making is, well, regardless of what the action is,
Mm-hmm.
to make a change in an existing land use development activity, shouldn't there be some degree of mitigation of impacts regardless of what the activity is? You can have variations in what the mitigation levels are. Maybe one, you just say, well, we need to put up a little bit better vegetation screening. Okay,
Right.
that could be one option. Something else could be, no, we need to do a much more expansive mitigation against visual and water and other factors. It could be potential negative impacts. But if you just
Right.
consider the impact, you're saying, oh yeah, it's going to be a big ugly building, but that's okay.
No, that's 100% right. What I will say is that this is just the general objectives and goals for the public facility, but a lot of these, like vegetation screening, buffering, are all included in other parts of the policy plan, so they're not completely being tossed out. I think a lot of times we rely on these other parts of, especially like the environmental and all these other agency reviewers, to strengthen a lot of what we need to do in terms of public facilities.
Well, there may be more discussion, but I'd like to hope that we would still maintain a policy of mitigating the impacts and not weaken that. And I think that mitigating the impacts may be an important protection for quality of life. People don't want impacts. And if it was a private applicant rather than, and some of these I guess could be a private applicant, but like on a special exception or special permit, there are development conditions to mitigate. On a 2232, there's not development conditions, so it makes it, I think, even more important that we consider it in terms of how big is it, where is it going, how close is it to the neighbors, is it really appropriate on this site to do this? And anyway, I don't want to belabor it, but I've given you the page and
Right.
the reference to it.
Yeah, and then the second question that Jim had was, I saw that Dominion was one of the stakeholders consulted, but not Novak. For those of us in the RC zoning area, we have electricity from Novak, not Dominion, period. Future substations and transmission lines for data centers or whatever use could have major impacts in the Novak territory also. Was Novak included? Question mark.
I believe that staff has coordinated with Novak as well.
All right, thank you.
And if you could just confirm that, since there is a significant portion of Western Sully District that falls under the Novak service area, not Dominion, we would appreciate that.
Okay. Will do. Thanks.
Anyone else in the group have any other comments or questions they would like to offer?
What's the timeline?
So right now we're finishing up our community engagement, and then the draft text will be finalized within the next month or so, and then we're going to go through another round with Planning Commission before ultimately getting to the board. So I think we're aiming at probably around December, if not early January, for
Thank you.
approval of the policy plan.
And this is separate from the other policy plan amendment. I thought there was a much bigger scope thing with harmonizing or aligning this with the One Fairfax and the strategic plan and some other things.
Yeah, so with this is just the public facility element of the policy plan, and Salem has been doing a lot of coordination to ensure that it aligns with the One Fairfax policy along with the strategic plan. But I think, like I said earlier, the board finally authorized the rest of the policy plan, so the rest of the comprehensive policy plan will be updated in the next few years.
I'm sorry, in the next 2 years?
I said in the next few years. I don't know how long that timeline is going to be, but I know it just got authorized earlier this year. So, and
All right,
that's just
thank
the
you.
rest of the policy plan and the comprehensive plan. We're probably the first element of the comprehensive plan that's going through an amendment at this time. And that's
So I
where
guess
there's going to
maybe
be a
it's,
lot more of aligning with the One Fairfax policy, aligning with the strategic plan, and then making sure that different elements are also aligned with each other and strengthen certain things such as that mitigation and other places where it's fitting.
so is it then reasonable to assume that the One Fairfax plan as it currently exists is not anticipated to change, and that the county strategic plan as it currently exists is not anticipated to change, but that all the other policy elements and the comprehensive plan are being tweaked, modified, adjusted, however, to better relate to One Fairfax and to the county strategic plan?
Yeah, I would say that. I think both the strategic plan and One Fairfax both just got adopted in the last few years. So I'm not sure if there's any plans to update that, but the comprehensive plan policy elements will all be updated. I think this is probably the first time that it's being looked at comprehensively. There have been like minor edits to different elements in the last 30, 40 years. So this is the first time that the whole policy plan will be updated.
Okay, do we have any other comments? What action are you looking from us, Mohammed?
We were just trying to get any sort of feedback that we could get. I think feedback that you mentioned earlier about the consider for the mitigation is one of them. But I could also give you guys enough time to like look through, and I'll give you guys our contact information if you guys want to submit like any questions or any sort of feedback as well.
Okay, so I think we have some comments in the chat,
Okay.
right? Have you
Yes.
seen those, Mohammed?
Not yet. I'll look
Okay.
through them though.
Before you finish and log off, check out the chat because I think the excuse me, the mitigation impact and the question about Novak, and I asked you if you could send us the slides that you've just presented as well.
Okay.
Is there anything else, or should we move on to the next item of the agenda?
Oh, this is Jay. I have one thought.
Please.
You know, I'm a little concerned that we're doing these major renovations of some of these documents. When we did ZMOD, we were told somewhat the same thing. Oh, we're just making minor tweaks. We're doing minor changes. You shouldn't be concerned. Trust me. I want to be sure that we don't run the same trap again. And if there are major changes, like Jim just pointed out, that those major changes be documented and put forth so that people can actually see what's going on and have enough time to ask questions and really consider the impacts of some of these changes that are being made. I think the point that we're taking out the word mitigating impacts is pretty significant because that sets forth an opportunity to actually mitigate an impact. We're going to say we're going to look at the problem and we're going to provide some mitigation to a known impact. When you just say consider impacts, that's just like Jim said, oh, we'll think about it. Yeah, we thought about it. Good enough. Move on.
Right.
No problem.
That's
And
a
I
very
think
good
we
point.
need to avoid that.
Very good point. Yeah. And I could check with staff to check why that was changed from consider. Why that mitigate was removed and it was changed to consider as well.
Well, that was only one example. I want to be sure that if there are any other major changes that have been made to this document, even though you've redlined through it, that the public be aware of what some of those changes are,
Absolutely.
without
I
having to
think
go
that
and read
that's
a
definitely the
1,000-page
plan.
document. All right, thank you.
And thank you for your comment.
What we have found, as Jay has pointed out, sometimes slight wording changes can remove the muscle behind a plan.
Hmm.
When you make it mealy mouthed and accommodating, you change will to may or shall to could be. And the net result is that things that we had accounted for and planned for in the past no longer happen or no longer have the force of the policy behind them.
Mhm.
We don't want to see that happen.
Right.
Okay. Anybody else have a comment before we let Mohamed go back? Since he's on somebody's dime, I think our dime. I don't hear anybody else, Mohamed. We thank you for that. Now, according to your schedule, there's going to be a public hearing sometime in October.
It'll be in November. It'll be all of it. All this information will be posted. I'll link the. I'll email you the link for the project website along with this presentation. And that website has all the information about dates about when we'll be meeting with Planning Commission and board. None of that has been scheduled just yet. I think we're still trying to finish up the community engagement process.
Okay, well, unless we hear otherwise, you have a possibility of some of our comments that we will present in writing at that meeting, a public meeting. Excuse me. As you can hear, I'm still having problems here. All right then, Mohamed, thank you so much for coming out this fine August evening.
All right, thank you guys so much.
Okay. All right.
Thank
So
you.
it's going to revert to me, and I'm going to make Lewis the host, the presenter. All right. Does anybody want to take the lead on this? Jim or Colin or anybody from Prince William? Would you like me to make Cynthia?
Cynthia,
Yes, Cynthia.
Cynthia.
I would like to actually take a few minutes to go through the application, some of the things that I think we shared a little bit before, but there are some things that now have come, I think, a little bit more into light. So I'd like to.
Okay, thank you. With that in mind, I'm going to make Lewis the manager of the meeting, and I'm going to fade away. It's before I die here. So
Bye.
thank you so much, everybody. I'm sorry.
Don't do that.
So die.
Take care. Take care.
Okay. So I just wanted to show you kind of an outline here of this is the actual building site that the data center would go. If I pan out a little bit, you can see you've got each of these buildings here that are the auto park buildings. If I pan out a little bit more, you've got the Porsche over here, you've got the storage unit place over here. And if I pan out even further, at the very end, you would start those two data centers that we have. One of the things I want to try to impress upon you is that each of the buildings within the auto park are very small. They are 26 feet for the Sheehy. There is 27.4 for the Jaguar. So there we have, you know, your Sheehy is here, your your Sheehy Infinity is here, your Toyota, your Jaguar, and I think the largest building is 35 feet. So now you bring in the data center. And this building is about 650 feet long. It's about 100, well, it's obviously 110 feet high, and it's about almost 300 feet wide. Now, if you look at that in comparison, it is enormous compared to the surrounding buildings. Now, if you take the data center that you have, that's also about a half a mile away, you can still see it's quite a bit smaller. That's about almost 500 feet long. It's 200 and I believe 20 feet wide. So it is thinner and smaller than the other building. Now, so obviously this thing is completely out of character for the area. Now, one thing I did want to mention, that the reason why they feel they can do that in this area is something called the Route 28 Tax District, okay? The Route 28 Tax District, some of you would know, that was created to help offset the costs for Route 28 road improvements. But no one, at least I certainly didn't, and I mentioned to a couple of planning commissioners, knew anything about any possible impacts on zoning. I did receive a memo from, it's called a fact sheet from the staff that has some language about how to determine zoning, rezoning when considering the Route 28 tax district. And the interesting thing was, I then said, well, this is a piece of paper that has no markings on it that are official. What does it belong to? And unfortunately, staff, Emma Estes and Billy O'Donnell, searched through and they said, we can't find any official document that this is in. And the reason why this is important, and this is my last point, is that, as I mentioned, this particular property that the current owner has, he has indicated that they will not be dedicating the 67 remaining acres to the park authority because it's too expensive to clean up. So in the draft proffers, they were offered, okay, well, it's an either or then. You can either pay $108,450 to the park authority, a one-time thing, or you clean up the 67 acres and you dedicate that. And they said, nope, that's way too expensive. We're not going to do that option. So we know they're not dedicating it. But the reason I think also driving force behind that is this is the bottom of their property in the blue. This is our pool in here. This is a vacant I-5 lot that immediately abuts their property. And if you go up a little bit, there's another one, another vacant I-5 lot that abuts their property. So if they purchase this and this, they can do the same thing they're doing now. And this is completely out of character for land unit H. I don't even know where to go with this, but I wanted to bring this to your attention because I've never heard of this rezoning piece of the Route 28 tax district. But because of that, because these vacant pieces are also in this Route 28 tax district, they would easily be able to say, well, we did it before. We can buy this piece of land. We can get this whole thing rezoned and let's build another mega data or center or warehouse. Let's buy this piece of land. Let's get this rezoned. Let's build another mega data center or warehouse. So now you're changing the area from this smaller suburban type area to suddenly this industrial area that it was never meant to be. And that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Well, I would say we appreciate that, those comments. I think that's very well researched, very well presented. I guess one question I have a little familiarity with the Route 28 tax district.
Okay.
I would think that some of that documentation you have should at least define how far from the center line or the existing right-of-way of Route 28 falls within that tax district. I know that same question came up on the Dulles Toll Road when the county and the state and the federal government were looking for additional funding to complete the Silver Line. And they said, well, here's the supplemental tax district to the north and south of the toll road, whose properties would be assessed an additional X dollars percent, whatever it was. Mm-hmm. I think the same thing would have to apply for Route 28. And
Right.
I'm thinking that this facility you're looking at might be a little far to the west of Route 28 to really fall into that criteria.
It is. It is very far, but it is not far enough. So I did have them send me the maps. And actually, if you just go on the property search for these that are even further south, like Route 28 is way over here. And then you've got Route 50. And then now you've come down like a mile or so from Route 50. And this right here, and I don't know if you can see it well enough, but I can send it to you. It distinctly says this is part of the Route 28 tax district. And so is this one. The amount of area that Route 28 tax district is much bigger than I ever would have thought it was. I thought it was closer to Route 28, just within that kind of that corridor, but extending several miles here into the western region of the county, and then even further south, I had no idea, and yet that is the way it is. So it's very, very real that they could simply say, well, we use the Route 28 tax district as the reasoning behind we're letting it go to 110 feet. If they used it for that, there's nothing preventing them from using it for these other pieces of the property, because again, it's here. It says Sully District, Route 28 Transportation District.
Well,
so,
that's true, but I think that, at least my interpretation as an engineer, not a lawyer, is that something like a defined tax district has to have a legal definition, giving its dimensions, having reference points. And I think the area that you're looking at there, significantly west of Route 28 on the south side of Route 50, seems to me to be very questionable. I know when you look at areas north of the Route 50, Route 28 interchange, following along Route 28, it's pretty easy to say where it does and does not fall into the tax district.
Yeah.
The distances you're talking about are much further away.
Well, let me just clarify real quick. I have the map. They did send me a map that outlined the tax district, and they are correct. It is this far out and that far down.
Well, right.
So,
What
yeah.
I'm saying is there has to be a legal definition of that
Let me jump in
for
because
the entire tax district.
this happened
Go ahead,
about
Jim.
40 years ago, or thereabout, maybe not quite.
30.
I'm gonna
1987.
but my recollection is that conceptually, the idea was we need to improve Route 28. Route 28 will bring commercial revenue. We need to figure out a way to generate money to pay for that. The way we will do it is that landowners will voluntarily opt in to pay extra taxes for a period of years. And in exchange for that penalty where they're paying extra taxes, we will cut them a break on something else. And I think, and again, I'm surprised staff is saying that there's nothing. I think that the original list of who's in and who's out was an opt-in voluntary kind of thing at some point, that people, if the landowners hadn't voted to go in, there wouldn't have been a tax district and none of this would have happened. So I suspect that in the dim past, somebody can check this, whoever owned what became the auto park, what this was, Westfields was part of it, not residential, but commercial and industrial property, that they voluntarily signed up for it and that they've been paying extra taxes for however many years. I thought also that the quid pro quo was not for height, but for intensity under certain circumstances. And in fact, I thought on this case that the reason, because I think there's a cap of a 0.35 FAR on a property like this, but that because this property has paid extra taxes for decades that the cap on intensity is relaxed. And I'm almost certain that's written down. And I think there's state legislation about tax districts. And so even if it seems odd, and I think this property is probably right at the edge of whatever the edge of the boundary is, I think there's a legal basis for this. They're not just making it up specially for this property.
Right.
Let me come back to the height thing for a minute, because the piece of this that's missing, and I think is potentially a deal killer, is the airport.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a, I forget what they call it, but like it's not a zone of death, but they don't want anything within a certain three-dimensional volume in proximity to the airport. And that initially they thought that the top of the building was flirting with the bottom plane of that forbidden zone. And it's going to be, 341 feet above sea level or whatever it is. But that the numbers in the application didn't seem to translate to that. They're saying the building is 110 feet high, but what does that mean in terms of sea level in the airport? And I had posed that question to the applicant, and I thought they were going to be on this tonight because the equipment didn't work last month, and he was trying to get in, and if he's not here, he's not here. But I had asked a series of questions, and one of them was, can somebody marry up the airport's numbers, the 341 feet, and the applicant's numbers or staff's numbers of 110 feet, and are they over or under? Because if they're over, I think that's a big deal. If they're under, it's still got all the other problems. But interfering with airport operations, if the building is too tall, and there's still issues, I guess, about lights or antennas or things, but that seems to me an unanswered question that the airport has raised, and it seems to me it ought to be objectively answerable if someone would take the data from the application and say that this property is elevated at X number of feet above sea level. At 110 feet, this building either does or doesn't conflict with what the airport is concerned about. And I don't think we know the answer to that sitting here tonight, whatever it is, but it seems to me that's extremely important to the airport anyway.
Well, that is.
And for
and that's
purposes of a
something where-
special exception, does the use interfere with or affect the use or development of nearby property? And if this is too tall for Dulles Airport, it does interfere with their ability to use it. And that seems to me would be a fail point for this if it's too tall. I don't know if it is, and hopefully they can tell us that. It's got other issues. I'm not sure. I think they're maybe more severe than height, but conflicting with the airport seems to be a big deal. Cynthia, what was your other point? You had the height, the tax district.
Right. No, that was the 2 points I wanted to make, because we've had other points that we've talked about before, because like, for example, with the staff report, I identified 20 pieces where staff departments.
I know now.
Right.
The conveyance to the park authority. It's complicated, but any applicant with this site would want to divest themselves of the unusable portions of the site because they don't want to pay taxes on it. If you can't use it for anything, if it doesn't help your business model, of course you want to dump it off. And there's not an HOA. You can't give it to the HOA and say it's common area. All you've got is the park authority. I had understood, and I may not have gotten the facts right, but that once before, a similar parcel or part of this, I don't know, was proposed to be dedicated to the park authority. I don't know if it was for the car dealer application or something else. And that for whatever that was, the park authority had said no, or at least a couple of the park authority people, park authority members had told me at that time, we're not taking it. There are potential hazmat issues, not, as I understand it now, not with this 67 acres, but a little bit south, but along the stream, there is an abandoned sewage plant. And that's a big toxic cleanup potential liability that nobody wants. And so they're not taking that on. They don't want any of that. And then there's probably other things in this stream, but I think there's someone said there's bamboo or, I mean, whatever it is. Nobody wants a liability for cleanup. So the park authority will either want the applicant to pay for the cleanup first and then give it to them, or they'll just say, no, thank you. You can keep it. You can be the owner and you can pay taxes on this swamp. If you can't get to it, you can't build anything on it. It's not going to be like picnic tables and athletic fields. I mean, it's not, I mean, it is what it is, but it's not a real plum. I think their policy is to take stream valleys, and they want stream valleys, but this particular one is kind of an orphan. And I'm not sure that point is going to be resolved either, but that was another question that I had for Evan. Have the issues with the park authority been resolved? Because if the park authority is satisfied, and my goodness, there's enough money floating around with this thing. If the park authority put a price tag on it, you would think they would just say, absolutely, write them a check and then give them the swamp. But that apparently hasn't happened, and I don't think we know why. It can't be just about bamboo. Cynthia, maybe you know more than I do, but
yeah, let me. Okay, so in the proffers, the park authority in their memorandum had stated several things that they were not comfortable with. And one of the things was they wanted some stronger language about the cleanup of the 67 acres before dedication. And so in the end, what happened was they proffered to say, all right, well, we'll pay you $108,450 for if it's the data center, or $40,000 if it's the warehouse, or we will clean up and then dedicate the property to you. And then that cleanup part, the park authority was pretty clear that they wanted invasive species removed, they wanted hazardous materials removed, they wanted all this to happen before they'd even consider it. And so, like I said, I've spoken several times at several of the meetings with the owner, and he just keeps saying that's just too expensive, it's too expensive. And I know, Jim, that you had said that, you know, it's kind of unusable land, but not all of it. See how this wraps around over here? And like I said, if they purchase this I-5, they can just simply do the same thing that they've done before, or that they've done with this. And then they have another one that's a little bit lower there. So if they can purchase these properties right here, that's not within the swamp area. And the actual, you did talk about the old sewage treatment plant. That's right about here. So it's not even on,
slightly.
Yeah, so it's off-site down here from
What's the
either
hazmat that they're concerned about?
in the proffers for the they didn't actually specify. They just said hazardous materials. So I'm not sure if they know that there's hazardous materials, or if they're just saying, we want to make sure, we want you to do this kind of cleanup and make sure before you even give it to us that it is free and clear of any issues, is my understanding.
Well, again, I think we don't have the answers to these questions tonight.
Mm-hmm.
I think it makes a difference if it's a big question mark. I mean, is the park authority getting it or not? And if they're not getting it, are we just going to wait for the other shoe to drop? Does this become part of a calculation for FAR on some other application, or an application to put fill in a floodplain or something? And I think even if it's adjacent to an I-5 or something that could be an I-5, I think topographically it's probably too low, and that there's either floodplain or RPA or both, and they're going to wring every drop from this 80 some acres, but they can't put anything down that low that's going to get flooded out or that close to a stream without some other layer of approval. There may be Chesapeake Bay issues even. I think they're going to try and stay out of the RPA, and I expect the RPA line has something to do with why it's blue or yellow on your thing, because this site only had a little island from the beginning. This site would have been built on 25 years ago if it was developable for anything. It had a little landlocked plateau in the middle that you couldn't get to. And that's the problem. But now there's nothing left in the county, and all of a sudden, oh, well, we'll put this gigantic data center because there's no place else to put it, even though we got a right in, right out. Oh, and that was the other thing with the warehouse. Somebody said that. Maybe you didn't say it, but if it's a warehouse, you still have the right in, right out problem with the trucks. And I don't, that whole loop-de-loop thing in Lafayette, I mean, who are they kidding? Really? I don't know. But anyway, I don't mean to, I mean, I think those were 3 of your points. And I want to say, if you had a 4th point, Cynthia, and I don't remember what it was.
Well, I will mention though, somebody was asking about when the actual next addendum, they will be doing an addendum to the staff report. And my understanding is that's supposed to be coming out September 7th. So I guess that's the 14 days you need before, well, it's really 13, but that's
it'll be the day after the night that they get it, and the planning commission will get it the night before, 2 weeks. So that's about right.
Okay, so that's what I was told. September 7th would be when the addendum, the staff report addendum will be coming out, as well as I assuming they'll be finalizing the proffers.
Don't expect them to flip to a denial. Because if Kathy wants this, you know, it is what it is. I mean, they're going to try and answer additional questions, and I hope the applicant will too, because I still think there's a lot of things about these impacts they really haven't addressed. I mean, and what the guy was saying tonight about the public facilities, where are the transmission lines going to go? And they're saying, well, we don't know yet. Well, okay, but if you've got all this tree save, can you punch through the tree save for utilities? And sometimes that's a note on the plat. It says we'll preserve the trees except if we need to have utility access or something. And you could have, like we've got in our community, we used to have 2 rows of Eiffel Towers, and now we have Eiffel Towers and poles. But there's a swath of
it's a cut down area. It's treeless.
Treeless, yeah.
Bush.
There's a big swath, and it goes from Gatepost to Fairfax National, and to the Soil and Green plant, and it cuts right through the middle of the neighborhood. And the impacts of that, the visual impacts of that, are pretty big. And I don't know if it makes the wallpaper turn brown and people's hair fall out or whatever happens, but it's a big deal. And the same thing with the substation. Where is the substation? And they must have figured out something. They must have some idea. And wouldn't that be an impact to be considered now, that if there's going to be a substation, is it feasible to have a substation within half a mile of this or 2 miles or, you know, wherever it is? I think there's more to that we haven't heard. And I think if we understood what their intentions were, or what, at least what research had been done, they must have some potential sites sort of penciled in. They must have some idea where the transmission lines would go. Those impacts ought to be considered now, because if the transmission lines have to come through the stream valley or come through the neighborhood, you know, if it's coming from the auto park, who cares? Well, maybe the airport cares.
Maybe they do.
If it's coming the other way, I don't know. I mean, I kind of feel like we ought to be talking about that now, because these assumptions about the trees muffling the noise or blocking the view or something. If there's a swath for transmission lines, there aren't going to be any trees.
Well, and the other issue for that, Jim, of course, is that we are elevated above the tree line in a good portion of our community. And they did even show that in the application that we have sight line. We will see it. I mean, from many parts of the community, mostly during, of course, the winter time. But so that sight line is there. And you're right, though, if we have no idea where the transmission lines will go. But I was told that because that's a separate, that 2232.
Well, it is separate, but I had questions about that too, and I said, because he said at the beginning, I thought they don't know if they're going to put it in Loudoun or Fairfax, and they don't know where it is exactly. But if they're spending how many millions of dollars for this thing, somebody has looked into that and said, yeah, there's 6 sites for a substation, and there's a corridor here for power lines, and this is what we're going to have to, this will have to be eminent domain, or there's an easement here already or something. Somebody has done due diligence on that already, I think. I can't believe it's just a big question mark, and that we have to guess as to what those impacts might be. I hope there's more information coming on that. I apologize because I couldn't understand. Kathy said something at not the last meeting, but the one where everyone was sort of yelling at her. She said, well, you know, that's between Dominion and Novak or something. I didn't really understand what she was saying, but I've got to believe they've had a sit down with Dominion or Novak, and they've said, well, we can put it here, here, and here, or that'll never work, or you know, something like that. Because if they can't do it, there's no point in doing this site. Of course they can.
Right. Well, and what they would have to have told either Dominion or Novak, as the people along Route 28, remember that session we had up there a year or so ago, where they came in and said, oh, well, we're here for Dominion. Why are you here? Well, we're putting in a substation to serve these new data centers that are by right developments. We said, what? So you look at that and say, okay, well, that's at least one example. We know the size of that substation. I'm sure Dominion could tell us a range of the cost on that and show us where they're getting the power from, and then the secondary transmission lines from the substation into the development. It's the same issue here for this proposed activity on the south side of Route 50. The question is, well, if it's right at the borderline between Dominion and Novak, you guys might go out and play around to golf, and whoever's regional manager wins, you don't have to worry about it.
Well, the other part of that, the guy with the substation on 28 had told us that the applicant's not paying for anything. The customers are paying, and we'll spread it around. Right. And I thought, well, okay, but to who? Is it just the neighbors, or is it the whole county, or everybody in Virginia, or who gets the privilege of paying the extra, and how much extra is it? Land acquisition is probably a big number, depending on what it is. I mean, if they need a big strip for the transmission lines, that acquiring the land rights to do that could be expensive. but
Right.
they
Right.
haven't explained that. Are we just paying for it? And Kathy again said something like, well, Novak and Dominion have to work that out between them. But again, can't somebody tell us something? How much extra do we have the privilege of paying for this substation where we don't know where it is with transmission lines that no one wants to talk about?
Yeah, you're right. And
Is
that
so
is
unreasonable?
no, not at all. And it's a fairly simple calculation. You know, I mean, these substations are basically unit elements. You say how big it needs to be, how much transmission capacity is needed there. You can say, well, that's between X and Y dollars. Same for the land. You know how big of a footprint a substation has. You know where it's located. You can determine here's what your right of way, now being a utility right of way, would have to be clear cut, nothing but grass and shrubs, no trees between that location and the connection into this data center. It's not rocket science. It's something you could do in about a day.
I'll say this too, and then I'll shut up. On Pleasant Valley Road in Virginia Run, there's an empty lot. It's about 2 acres. It's owned by Novak. I think we don't want that to be, I mean, we don't want it anyway, but we don't want that to be the substation, and we don't want the transmission lines running from that to the data center. And Jay, you know probably exactly the lot I'm talking about. It's
I do.
triangular. It's on the west side of Pleasant Valley Road, and
Right next to the high power lines that you talked about earlier.
yeah, we just, I mean,
Yep.
if they're making a short list of sites, I mean, I'd like somebody to say, no, it isn't going there.
I'm
But
going to be
that
looking
sounds like
into
a
that.
perfect
Maybe I'm
location.
jinxing it by saying that.
Yeah, I'm going to look
Okay,
And
into
as
it.
long as Kathy doesn't live within sight distance of that, she doesn't care.
If she can stick it to us, she will.
Mm. So I'm sorry, can I ask a question then? So I thought Novak is also part of, what is that, the PJM, which is the whole regional power, for this eastern southern coast area, and that they also share power sometimes with Dominion, like Dominion supplies them. Am I wrong in my understanding of that?
I don't think you are.
Novak buys electricity from Dominion. Novak has separate equipment and billing and everything else. We are members of an electric cooperative, and I guess we get rebates every so often, and we're like stockholders and we vote on things. It used to be called something Rural Electric Cooperative, and then they fancied it up a little bit and it became Novak. But we are sort of, we're like stockholders or stakeholders in it. And I think we have to pay a little extra because Dominion Dominion's in charge of it, and we're just a little subset. And then there are 8 or 10 other semi-Novaks. They have different names, but they're throughout the state. There are these little rural pockets that have a rural electric cooperative, where it was like in the 30s where people wanted to get electricity, and so they had to band together and form a little club and pay for it, and that's what happened. And we're sort of the downstream from that a couple generations.
Okay, thanks.
But again, I didn't understand what Kathy was saying 2 meetings ago. If she addressed that somehow, and it was a double talk.
I think it was answered out of ignorance. She didn't know what the right answer was, so she gave us the double talk.
But it better not be that the Novak people are paying for this stink bomb. I mean, I don't know, but that doesn't seem fair. And I don't want everybody stuck with it either, but
Well, it's likely that they made it sound like all the customers would be paying. And since they were suggesting, since the data centers are significant power users, that their contributions would be significant.
Yes, I remember that too, Stephen. He's correct. He said that because we're bigger, we have more power that we're using, we're also paying a lot more than any of you would be paying.
this may be a dumb question, but what are we doing if the applicant's not here tonight? I thought the problem last time was that the equipment didn't work, and so we were going to bump it a month and talk to him tonight. What happened?
That was kind of my understanding as well. I don't know if they had any further discussion with Jeff or something, or decided to push it off a little further. I do not know the details on that.
Well, are we going to have one more meeting before the Planning Commission public hearing?
I would suggest that we do that.
Because it's the 20th. Do you have a meeting before September 20th?
Yeah, we can kind of set it when we would like. I guess that would be the
The 18th,
18th.
maybe
Maybe
18th.
we should invite him back to try and answer the questions, because we never really, that we had kind of a misfire, and the two meetings with Kathy didn't go very well. And I don't think we know a whole bunch of stuff. I don't think we know what staff, I mean, maybe there's conceivably something in the staff addendum that we would ask about, or the park authority thing ripens a little bit. Maybe somebody thinks of something. You know, man, we got issues with air quality and the diesel spills and everything else. But if we don't have to decide any tonight, why don't we have him come back in September? I thought he was coming tonight, and that's kind of why I cleared the decks for this, because I thought he would be here to answer questions, or virtually to answer questions. And Jeff even sent out an email about it, I thought.
Yeah, I don't
I thought there
remember.
was something in that regard too. Yeah.
I mean, I personally don't have a problem with postponing any decisions. I certainly would not have an affirmative decision tonight, not the one that Jeff suggested anyways. I think we're in a position to say we would not consider either of the two options. Again, I think the auto park and the new auto thing that they were talking about is a red herring. I think that should be thrown out and get off the table. The only thing that's up for consideration is one alternative being a data center, two alternative being the warehouse. We're in no position, I think, at this point to go yes or no, to affirm or not to affirm on either of those two. There are just too many unanswered questions for us to make a fact-based decision.
I guess I missed the issue about the auto park, but the auto park, the whole auto park, the big auto park, and the areas around it were, I thought, pretty successfully handled in that it got car dealers sort of off of Route 50 frontage and all in the same place and centralized. And the problem with the auto park, or one problem with the auto park, was it was too small. And that we did the circle first, and then the court that's just to the south of it with, 3 or 4 more there. And then they started going on the east side of Stonecroft, because everyone wanted to be part of the auto park. And then the Porsche dealer went in up at the corner. So it's now twice as big as what we started with. I think if we had if we had been 30 years ago, if we'd known, we might have said, make it bigger. But generally, that was successfully handled. And one more auto dealer sort of off the back side, if they could get through in between, would be okay. And I could kind of rationalize that. And that's kind of why I went along with the auto dealer thing the last time. It's a crummy site for anything. I think the warehouse is worse for some reason, and the data center, I can't even believe we're in a stream valley with diesel and everything else. But are they saying now, if you don't approve the data center, we'll go back to the car dealer? I mean, the car dealer might not be so bad. I mean, anything is bad, but I didn't understand also, why did Kathy say the environmental effects are less for the data center than the car dealer? And what was that based on?
Well, that was her statement without any real knowledge. I think.
Well, I'm asking, is there
correct.
Was there some comparative study? What is
well, actually, let me interject on that, because they said that the encroachment on the RPA was more for that dealership that was approved during the pandemic. So when they decided to rezone from I-3 to the I-5C8 for this particular dealership, they had to evidently encroach more upon the RPA than they would be encroaching given the warehouse or the data center. So in her mind, or in people's minds, that they're trying to say that because of that encroachment, barring nothing else, like not barring the fact that we need a whole new substation or that there's going to be all this diesel and noise, but because of just that encroachment piece, that's
she said environmental impact. She didn't say Stream Valley encroachment.
Well, when she said environmental impact, that's because that's what she's being told by the applicant, saying, look, we're better for the environment. If you look at the applicant's presentations, they constantly said that the dealership will encroach more than either of our current options. And because of that, they said, therefore, it is environmentally more friendly. And I'm like, wow, that's a huge leap. From being encroaching on the RPA versus actually being environmentally more friendly. But that's the direction that they've been doing their spiel, let's say.
Yeah, and Jim Neighbors put a couple questions in the chat pod. Let me hit those real quick because they kind of relate to what we've been talking about here. First one is, given this early in the planning process, will Dominion Energy know the specific details of their power plan? Question mark. Maybe, maybe not. Second question, I thought the developers.
Yeah, maybe not, but they must know something.
Well, I'm sure they do, but they keep telling us that's proprietary information. We cannot tell you what the energy consumption is. We cannot tell you what the equipment inside the building is. To me, that is a blatant lie.
I agree.
But they can claim proprietary information and get away with it.
It's not proprietary.
Damn right it's not. You could look at any of these data centers in Fairfax and Loudoun County. I'm sure there are records probably accessible through the public, through Dominion, how much power is being consumed by sites A, B, C, D, E. Because that's the way they keep track of things. How much power do we have to pump into this place? Because that's what we send them a bill for. So you know damn well
they were 25% of the statewide consumption.
Yeah.
25% of the state's consumption.
For the entire Commonwealth of Virginia.
I can't get my head around that.
It's an enormous number.
Well, just think about that. You could say, okay, what would happen if you turned off all those places? Would our rates, costs drop by 25%? No. Dominion, I'm sure, has a guaranteed return on their investment. They'd jack up the rates more, so their amount of money would remain the same.
The 25%, is that current consumption or planned consumption?
No, that's current.
Now,
Unbelievable.
Yeah, it is.
is it a terrorist target?
Yes,
One would think.
Definitely, since it's like 70% of all the internet services in the country go through that portal or that area.
Right?
there's a thing called electromagnetic pulse, EMP.
Yep.
They
Yep.
could put everything in this area in the blackout, EMP. That's a military term that they use for that type of warfare.
Yeah. Jim also asked, didn't the airport recommend that the application not be
Yes,
because of height?
yes.
Yeah.
They did not
I
provide the
think their memo, they were asking specifically that a couple questions be answered. One of them was, does the height conflict with their operational zone? And then I think they didn't want lights pointing up, and they may have had something else. I don't think they flat out said deny it. I think they said they had
grave concerns.
objections to those types of things, something like that. But I don't think those questions ever were answered.
No,
Not
we're
certainly
not.
not in the staff report.
Well, and that's the thing where that zone you're referring to, that's the designated approach zone to the runway. That is
It's-
an easily calculated mathematical feature.
What's sea level?
21
like
feet above sea level.
110 feet.
Yeah,
Does that
Yeah.
put it in the zone?
well, that's right. And it's 110 feet above whatever the ground elevation is that 110 feet begins with. 'Cause
And the
that
ground
gives
ele-
you
Right, and the
height
ground
above
elevation
sea
there is
level.
250 to 260. So 250 to 260 is the ground elevation that they have there. That was stated also as part of them, and you can verify that, of course, with USGS. But yes, and then 110 feet on top of
That's
that.
the case, they're 20 feet over it, 30 feet over it.
Well, they would be then at
They digging.
360 to 370, and the actual I have the memo here. The actual AGL is 150. I'm sorry, 364.12. So 364 feet above medium sea level is the height that they said you cannot exceed that, or it will be in critical air navigation surface, is what they call
I
it.
thought it was 342.
No, it's 364.12. I have the letter.
Whatever
right
it
here.
is.
So, yeah. But either way, if it's already at 250 to 260, then 110 is going to be 360 to 370. And they also, of course, have to do dewatering, and they have to support the surface and the soil. So that could, who knows how that'll affect the elevation at the ground level there. If you have to shore up a building in order to support it, it's
Well, they could dig down.
or they, I guess, but then what are you
But
risking
then-
flooding?
And that's
Yeah.
not, but then that's not building height. And then
Yeah, they can't go down too low because they're already in a floodplain.
Right.
So
Right.
the answer probably is, oh, we heard you, we listened, we'll make the building 3 feet shorter.
but what about the HVAC equipment? And I mean, they're going to need lights up on the roof. They are going
Staff
to need.
says the 110 is a absolute cap, nothing penetrating above that.
They're cutting it very close.
Well, yeah, that's what Emma was saying.
Maybe we're not going to get answers tonight. Maybe people will have other questions, but maybe the proper thing to do is to get Jeff or whoever to invite them back, whatever that Monday night is, before the public hearing, and see if any of this has ripened.
I agree.
I have a silly question as I usually come up with. Has anybody heard whether Dominion is installing any grid-based battery storage?
Nope.
Because you know, to properly service data centers, they I mean, you need to require, you need reliable power, and it's the utilities' responsibility to provide that power. So what I'm suggesting is the data centers should provide battery storage that would last maybe a couple minutes. They have batteries that will support a data center for a couple minutes. Plenty of time to do a cloud service failover. But it's really the responsibility of the electric company to provide reliable power. So you can't expect the data center to run on generators for days at a time. So if you have a long-term outage, you would have to have grid storage batteries, and they need to spread these things out across the state, across their to the various areas that they're servicing.
I thought though when DEQ was having the comment period for the diesel generators, for Loudon, they were saying that there were going to have to be, that they were already considering the need for rolling brownouts. So I don't understand where the assumption's coming from that Dominion even has the capability to supply the power.
Well, that's another question. Why are we building data centers for which there is no power?
It seems crazy.
For the revenue coming in from the projections provided by the applicant.
Well,
period.
I think what Dominion, or I think what DEQ was saying is that between March and July of 2023, we were going to be over.
Right.
And that we had to anticipate relaxing the air pollution standards because the diesel generators would be running to make up for the shortfall. And then I think the industry didn't want to have words put in their mouth. And so the variances were withdrawn. So what's happening now, I don't know. I mean, a day like today, I was wheezing a little bit outside and it smells to me like burnt leaves. I think that's the Canadian fires or whatever's happening. But I think they just kicked the can down the road. But I don't think that there's any more electrical capacity today than there was in February. And in February, they were saying we were already maxed out, and that they couldn't supply enough electricity sometime between March and July. We were going to run out.
Right.
Well, then perhaps these data centers should be part of a tax district that would build these grid storage, these required grid storage installations, because that's what's really needed. They're creating problems. They're creating problems, but they're providing no solutions.
Which is another question, which is another comment that Jim Neighbors just put up a minute or two ago about would Dominion Energy have to notify customers about potential brownouts, ? Life support systems, emergency services, etc. To look
Well,
at it, there are a lot of things, and data centers are one of them. Data centers have to have continuous, stable power 24/7, 365.
they don't now. Or at least Novec doesn't, because I've had doctor's letters on file with Novec, and I have I sleep with a breathing machine, and I have a heart monitor next to my bed,
Right.
and I get downloaded at 2 a.m. every night. And if the power goes out, I can't sleep because my equipment isn't working. And we had electricity out a week or 10 days ago for about 4 hours.
Yep.
And I was using my phone to get on the Novec website to find out, and there's nothing. I mean, they can't tell you anything. They don't do it now. Well, I guess I'm a priority to be restored, but it doesn't change anything. My power goes out and comes on with everybody else's. And I don't know that it's getting any better with a data center down the road, causing more of a brownout, like Jahan is saying.
We've been there for 25 years, and I can remember counting on my hands 5 times maybe in the 25 years prior to this last episode Jim's talking about, where we've had a power outage. We had one power outage during Snowmageddon that lasted about 4 or 5 hours, and we've had blinking off and on maybe 3 or 4 times since then. Within the last
Hurricane Isabel, we didn't have power, we didn't have water for a while.
Well, I wasn't here for Isabel. Was I?
Okay, well, we had problems in Isabel.
Oh, did you?
Well, there are trees down everywhere, and it was the water. No water was worse than no electricity.
Yeah. Okay. But within the last month and a half or 2 months, we've had at least 5 to 6 instances of the power going out. And it could go out for a few minutes, turn back on again, blink on and off, blink on and off, finally come back on again and stay on. But we've had a lot of them quite recently.
I can tell you that in Eastern Sully, so Bob and I moved here in 2000, and we very quickly realized that even back then, and some of that may have to do with maintenance of the corridors, but we lose power all the time.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
when we lose power, we lose water. And we finally threw in the towel, and we have a whole house generator now and a map that tells me, when the generator runs, because I have to have the service guy come in and put oil in it and change the air filter and everything else. And it's going off a lot.
Yeah.
We're losing power a lot.
Okay.
We're mostly undergrounded in the neighborhood, and that was supposed to protect us from like thunderstorms and trees falling mostly. I mean, there's some telephone poles along Pleasant Valley Road, there's some along Lee Highway, but I think mostly in the neighborhood, we're except for the Eiffel Towers, we mostly underground. And so if it's like trees coming down in the snow, we usually stay on with Novec, I think.
Right.
But I think that's different from the system being maxed out because there's too much
Right.
demand.
Right.
Hot weather and air conditioners and data centers, I guess.
When it was hot the other week, we lost power a lot. That goes along with what DEQ was saying. We're in that period when there were going to be outages.
What they really need right now is grid battery storage, where they can accumulate power, collect power at night and provide it during the day. I mean, that's I know it costs money, but that's what's needed, and they need to think about it. They need to think about providing this capability to meet their needs.
Steve, I hear you, but I don't see that happening. I really don't. They're providing in 99.9% of the time, and that's probably good enough for them.
Well, that's
But-
good enough for them until they build the data centers.
Well, I know.
Yeah. But you're right. I mean, it's a vicious cycle, because if you only generate enough power for your current demands, and then you have something that comes online that's going to increase that by 20, 30% in a region, you better have additional power generation sources or a way to get that power in from someplace else via regional or interstate transmission facilities.
Well, Dominion and Novec are the only two sources of power for us here. If one of them needs
That's
to
right.
draw on, they'll draw on the other. But if they're
Yep.
both being
Yep.
drawn down to the point that there's nowhere to go, what happens? The lights go out and the
Right.
generators come on. And we're sitting here in the dark, in the cold or the heat, while the data centers are sitting fat, dumb, and happy because they're cool and they're lighted
Yep.
and they're whatever else they need. Lou, I don't think we're going to go any
Yeah.
further with this discussion. we're beating
Probably
this
not.
dead horse.
Probably not.
Sure.
And the horse is just laughing at us, I think.
I think we need
I
the
guess one-
applicant to participate in the discussion, and
Agreed.
I don't know why, I don't know what happened.
Yeah, I do not know either. Wish I could kind of say. I guess one quick question, since I'm not a real frequent WebEx user. Any of you that are, on which of the commands up top, like file, edit, share, view, whatever, would I want to open and then save this recording? Because that's one thing Jeff asked me to do before we all signed off.
I would just think it's under file.
Under file, let me
That's
see
where
what
most
we
We
Yeah.
got save and save as, but I don't know.
We're under audio, video, save recording. I don't know.
That might, let me look here under audio, video.
Who's the host?
Lewis.
Lou is
I'm
now.
the designated host. Yeah, Jeff flipped it over to me.
Well, my
when he-
computer, wait a minute. My computer says Cynthia is the host.
I'm the host. How am I the host?
Well, I don't know. It says Cynthia should be the host.
That is, that's exactly right.
Well.
Thanks, Cynthia.
Oh, great.
It's like
Take it away,
hostess. I don't
Cynthia.
know. It says host.
Okay.
Okay. So am I supposed to try to store something or?
See
Can I-
if you can
I think
find
somebody has to
save.
hit
File-
save.
File save.
Or there is something under participant at the bottom. It says reclaim host role.
Then you should reclaim
That
the
would be
host
you.
row. Yeah,
Let me see what
that-
happens if I hit that. Okay.
yeah.
So I just hit that, reclaim host role. Host key. That must be something Jeff has. I don't have that.
Oh, good Lord.
Mine
Can't
still says
scroll down.
Cynthia is the host.
Well. hold
Yeah.
on,
Hey,
let's see.
maybe Cynthia can reassign a host.
Yeah, let me look. I'm looking now.
Yeah,
Let's
See if you
see.
can do that.
Okay, not that. Wait a second.
Where's Jim Neighbors when you need him? He's normally the host.
Yeah,
nope.
he punched out about 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, I saw that.
Let's grab. I'll put this on.
Understand why the airport's being so wishy-washy about this. Does MWA not say don't do something?
You would think they would.
I don't know. I've sent a couple emails to Michael Cooper, just to keep him in the loop. I think he was out of town, but they did send staff a memo. And I've got to think they've had some
Okay,
administrative
Louis,
control over something.
your host.
Am I not? I'm now the host. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, Lou is now the host.
So do whatever you need to do, man.
All right. So let me go up here to see audio and video. Switch settings, unmute video settings. Okay. Let me look at file. Here I've got save. Okay. Save, save as, save all. So I can save the chat, save as, chat.
Well, more
save
than the
all.
chat, I think you want to save the video.
Right.
Yeah, I'm looking, see if that's an option I've got here. Chat, send transcript, leave meeting. So save. It's not changing. Edit. Share. View. Audio and video. Let's see.
The only place that I see to save mousing around here is under file, and I
Yeah, that's
probably
what I
give
saw
it a
too.
name, Louis. I don't know. You'd give it a name, otherwise, how could it be called back?
Good question. Yeah. See if there's anything under meeting. Recording, recorder settings. What's this say?
I'm gonna see if I can bring it up as
Blank.
a phone. Say, how do you save in a WebEx?
Yeah. Yeah. If you could check that, that would be helpful. Because I don't use this very much at all. Pretty much all Team and Zoom. A little bit different. There's a help. I wonder if that does anything.
I can see how to save chat, but I can't see how to save the video.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do I save a WebEx recording to my desktop?
It should be close enough.
Well,
Sign in.
I've got an icon that says meeting recording is in progress. It's a red button up in the upper right,
Right.
but I don't know what to do with that.
That's the recording, but we want to save that. We want to stop recording and save it.
If you right button mouse click, it'll give you a save as.
Okay.
Go up there and put your
Okay.
mouse on it and do a right button mouse click.
Keeping recording is in progress. I'll do a right button click.
Says save as.
And it didn't show anything at all.
More results.
The,
WebEx.
the little red button up on top, right?
Yeah, just put your mouse on it. You'll see it says meeting recording in progress. Hit the right button mouse, the right button on your mouse. It'll show up as a save as.
It's not popping up on mine.
Ooh.
That's weird. Let me see what this other one is. I just don't want to do it. That's a bummer. File. Save as.
For Windows recordings, save to the documents folder in my computer. That's the default setting. Always save recordings to a local folder on your computer. Don't save recordings to a network file location, since you can't play back recordings from a network file location. So you're going to be saving it to your computer, I guess,
Yeah,
Louis.
what it sounds like. Save it to your desktop, computer, laptop,
Right.
and is it in your document
Right.
file?
Yeah, I can do that, but the only place I can see to save is on the File tab. I can't get anything on that red button on the upper right. You shows that meeting recording is in progress and it's not changing. Now, let me try it here on.
And here's something else that says, start the recording by click record. You can pause, resume. You click stop to end your current recording. When the meeting or event ends, your recording saves to your computer. By magic? I don't know.
Okay, so just stop recording, right?
And then save the file. Save the file to your hard drive.
And record. So at the bottom, I've got a line. It says record, a little flashing red button. It says recording is in progress. Open the recorder to manage recording.
Ah,
So where is the recording? Not there. What's in there? More options. Not needed bytes. It's not helping.
you can keep recording and go watch a YouTube video.
Yeah, that's about true. This is strange. Very strange. Captions.
Those who have a paid subscription to the app, and that's Jeff, can record a
Right.
meeting and save it to the cloud. But obviously,
Yep, I do not have a paid subscription to WebEx. Okay, well, it should.
you can only
Maybe
record a
just
WebEx
save.
event or meeting if you're the host or alternate host. Okay.
Okay. So maybe that's how Cynthia got in there. Open and share, chat, save. Save. Chat. Okay, I hit save chat and it kind of opened up some spaces on my laptop. Okay. Let me just stick it in, just put it in my desktop just to save. Do that. So that's now saved there. Okay. And then save that again. Okay. Try to save. What else I can do? Try save all. Select the files you want to save. I want to save chat. Okay. And that tells me where to put it. Okay. So, all right. I think that's about as good as I can do, and I'll pass that on to Jeff.
All
Well,
right,
thank you everyone for your assistance.
no problem.
We'll get there. We'll get
Yeah, eventually.
Good seeing you, John.
Yeah.
there. Yeah, so,
You take care.
all righty.
Bye all.
Good night, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye, Cynthia.
Bye.